Occasionally in this job you come across people who simply inspire you. Hazel Hawke certainly does. As Bob Hawke's wife, she brought grace and intelligent charm to her role at the Lodge. When Hawke was dumped as Labor's Prime Minister, Hazel left her job much loved, then greatly admired for the dignified way she coped with their public divorce. But 3 years ago, shattering news. Hazel was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. At first, she was angry, furious in fact, that just as she was getting back on her feet, this should happen. Well, a lot of time has passed since then, and Hazel's feeling the effects of this cruel illness. But she's still strong, still brave, and still fighting. For 3 years, Hazel Hawke has been living with Alzheimer's disease, and mostly seems to be coping extremely well. But Alzheimer's is a slow, creeping disease, and looks can be deceiving.
Quite a looker
My
there.
sister's name's Edith, but Mum was Edith too, was she?
Yeah, Mum was
she
Edith
was.
too.
As
but
the
nobody ever
disease
called her
progresses, Hazel's world
Gran
is
or
shrinking.
Is this you?
that. That's you with me just after I was born.
Now it revolves around her immediate family, in particular daughter Sue and granddaughter Sophie.
Yeah, great. I had this thing, and I thought it was a bugger and said so, but it hasn't spoiled my life at all. I've got a good life. I'm looking askance at Bob. What am I doing here? I'm marrying this man.
She's a little bit less there more of the time. You can just feel the erosion slowly a bit more.
Sue Peters Hawke has become her mother's primary carer and her greatest protector.
There is a little bit more confusion creeping further back in memory to middle and longer term stuff. That's still very clear on the whole, but it can be a little bit more muddled or inaccurate sometimes when she tells those stories. Doesn't matter, the life and the energy is still there in those memories. Details maybe a little bit more wonky.
Well, what's your program today?
Over the years, the very public Hawke family has battled to maintain some privacy. Sue has reluctantly surrendered some of that privacy by writing a book about Hazel's journey since her diagnosis with Alzheimer's. You said this is not a story you wanted to tell. Was it made more difficult by the fact that you're so fiercely protective of a family that's been so public?
Yeah. I have a pretty deeply developed privacy reflex around things that seem to me to fall into that. And this book involves sort of ripping that open.
But the book stemmed from her mother's decision to go public about her illness on the ABC a year ago.
Well, I wouldn't have chosen to have Alzheimer's, but I like my life. On the other hand, it didn't
Back
bother me
then,
that
she
much.
was clearly still angry.
I just don't want my life to get more complicated. It's complicated enough. It's been a very public divorce.
Yes.
And the whole box and dice.
Yes.
For Hazel, Alzheimer's couldn't have come at a worse time.
That's what really gives me the shits.
And her anger at the disease was typical of those who get it.
That's really important.
How angry did your mum get?
Oh, she was pretty wild there for a while.
I mean, I gather she was really angry.
Yeah, I mean, she had a period where I think anger was one of the main sort of emotional tones of her life, which was really unusual for her. And then within that, there'd be particular episodes where she'd be really ropeable, and it was pretty tough. This is some of what you said.
It's a bugger. That's what I said.
Hazel has since become
It's a
more
bugger.
accepting of her illness. At times, she can even laugh about it.
You've got a chapter.
I've got a chapter.
Woo, woo, woo. I don't remember when I realised my grandmother had Alzheimer's. Have you forgotten?
It's sort of like a dance. I mean, my approach has been not to intervene until you absolutely bloody have to, really. And that leads to some hiccups or coughs or risks sometimes. But Mum, especially earlier in the disease, was very, very clear about wanting to assume her own risks. The thought of having to consider an intervention that reduces any sense of meaning or value in her life is one I find pretty horrible.
For a woman whose work once took her around the world, Hazel now doesn't venture far from home.
I just love the place. It's a lovely place to be. I'm very fortunate. The birds come and it's a very, very nice place to be. And I walk most days. Well, I either garden or walk. I do something physical every day.
And you think that's important?
Well, yeah, because I enjoy it. And the reason I walk up is just to keep in touch with the locals and do a bit of shopping and sit and have a coffee, whatever.
Mum hasn't lost her sense of dignity, her sense of pride, and I haven't lost my sense of her dignity or my pride in her. I think dignity is more to do with the core of a person and who they are and their character, and Alzheimer's doesn't wipe out that or the memory of it. So, no, I think all those things are still there.
Alzheimer's is not a mental illness.
Somebody gave me a little packet of seeds.
It's a disease that attacks the brain cells, eventually shrinking the brain itself.
I've sort of taken over, haven't I?
But for now, Hazel is able to maintain a degree of freedom. She lives in her own home right next door to Sue and Sophie.
Bossy boots here.
Is she really bossy?
Oh, she's terrible. Cracks the whip.
Oh, Mum.
Sophie's enjoying this.
Are you dreading the day, though, when you know that you may have to intervene in terms of that independence?
Yeah, of course.
I'd die rather than go on that. Absolutely.
She knows instinctively what's right, and that's a very finely tuned sense of integrity. Most of the rest of us would wallow around in possibilities, but she gets straight to the point.
Wendy McCarthy has been a close friend for more than 20 years. She encouraged Hazel to go public with her illness. What impact do you think Hazel has had in going public?
From the humblest person to the best of people with the most advantages, there's been admiration for speaking out and offering leadership.
I'm angry and I'm so sad and I'm wondering why.
Alzheimer's Australia runs support groups for carers who must shoulder the burden when a loved one is diagnosed. Right now, 176,000 Australians suffer from the disease.
You've got to live with it or you've got to work with it to be able to pick it.
As our population ages, over the next 35 years, that number will triple to more than 500,000.
This room is dementia specific.
For Lewis Kaplan, CEO of Alzheimer's Australia, Hazel's public disclosure was very important.
A lot of those people made it quite clear that the reason they were now able to come out was because Hazel came out. If it's all right for Hazel to have Alzheimer's, it's all right for us.
I think we should count the wrinkles. Look at them all. Here and here. And
Do you think it's made a difference to the public?
well, I have no idea. Who assesses how the public feels about Hazel Hawke having Alzheimer's? I mean, the idea was to destigmatise it because there was a stigma, and perhaps there still is in some degree, that if you've got Alzheimer's, oh, she's losing her marbles, you know. And I think it has, well, in my perception it's made a difference. But I think it was okay because to have an illness like that, and there's a lot of it, the figures are pretty scary. But to have it's not exactly a disability, Well, it is in some degree, of course. As a nuisance, it's a jolly nuisance. But it doesn't affect my life very much.
So it's so easy going up there, it's easy distance? Yeah. You do it almost every day, don't you?
Yeah, I do, a lot. And I usually take...
Alzheimer's is often described as, watching someone die before your eyes. Is that unfair or is that truth?
Oh, it's just a phrase, but you can see where it comes from. I mean, a lot of the things that have made them seem to be them are slowly disappearing. And so, yeah, it is called a living death or those sorts of things, and in some ways, yes, it is. And I think that's probably especially apparent in the later stages, which we haven't faced yet.
There's no escaping the inevitability of the disease. Hazel's memory will eventually fade completely. Her bright intellect is dimming. Already friends and family have seen the warning signs.
So I had one evening with her where after an hour and a half or so, she suddenly turned to me and said, who are you? And my heart just went cold, and I said, Hazel, it's Wendy. And she said, no, I don't think it is. I've only had one of those moments, but it was really scary because I thought, this is how it will be.
This is to come.
This is what happens in the end.
There's nothing gained by worrying ahead more than you can help. You just sort of have to think, well, you're going to have to face this or that or the other. You'll deal with that when it comes. Because otherwise you'd spend your time just too sad and there's no point. It spoils the present. Because in the present, Mum's pretty happy and has a pretty good sense of her life and is quite honest about the things that she's not too happy about. And I mean, when you think about it, that's pretty normal. It's like a lot of us. So, yeah, it's not worth getting too tied up in knots about it, I don't think.
It seems to me that if you have an illness, it's an illness. It's not a shameful thing. I mean, it might be rheumatic fever or any sorts of things. But it's not a shameful thing.
Is that the most important message, do you think?
It's how you deal with it. I mean, if you get something, you've got it. It's how you deal with it.
Hello, I'm Tom Steinfort. Thanks for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our Extra Minutes segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes on 9now.com.au, as well as the 9Now app.